Hey guys, today we're talking about two movies. One is a drama and the other a documentary. The drama film we're going to talk about is The Fabelmans, the latest movie directed by Steven Spielberg, who as of late has released like a ton of movies. Remember, last year we had West Side Story, for which he was nominated once again for Best Director on the Academy Awards, and that movie did very well in the awards season. Not so good in the box office, and actually The Fabelmans has been the same story. It bombed in the box office in the cinemas, but people have been appreciated it on streaming and also on the awards season. I mean, it has won various awards, including the Golden Globe for Best Drama, which is a big deal, to be honest. And I think it maybe won Best Director for Steven Spielberg. I don't really remember because I didn't watch the Golden Globe as such, but that's a big thing. That's a big deal. This time around, he does a movie about, basically the movie is kind of a biopic, but not literally a biopic, about his own life. Actually, he is inspired by his life to tell the story of Sammy, or Sam, a young man that is a very frightened little boy, but he soon learns how to make movies and what movies like really are all about, and how you can create basically new worlds and new realities with this medium. And around that, you have also the story of his family, especially the relationship between his mom, his dad, and also his dad's best friend, who ends up being, I mean, this is not a spoiler at all, because if you have seen anything about this movie, this is very obvious, but the friend of the dad is actually the mother's lover, basically, which is of course very complicated and but very obvious from the start of the movie. I don't know if no one picked that up from the start, but it's pretty clear in the first, like, I don't know, 15 minutes of the movie. I thought actually that I wasn't going to enjoy this movie, to be very honest. I was like, okay, Steven Spielberg has been hit or miss for me. I mean, he has fantastic movies like Jaws, like Schindler's List, like many unappreciated movies like Munich, for example. He's coming and going, let's say. But there are some other movies that I don't really love that much, including West Side Story. I think that West Side Story is a movie that we didn't really need it, especially when it's an updated, a little bit copy of the 1960s movie, 1960 actually movie. And actually, it was such a copy that Ariana DeBose actually won the Academy Award for portraying the same role Rita Moreno won the Oscar for in the next 1960 version of West Side Story, which I thought it was very uninspiring from the Academy to award that to Ariana DeBose, not only because the performance was fine, but it wasn't that amazing, and really the same character again, like it was very lazy, to be honest. I think Kirsten Dunst should have won last year, but whatever. However, this time around, I do understand the hype for this movie, because I thought it was going to be like, oh, Spielberg explores his childhood, like, and being all fancy and being like, oh, I was really smart about it or whatever. But I think the most important part of this movie is not really how he builds his career, basically, from a young age, but how his family is a driving force around that, and how he develops as an artist with the opposition of his father, the favor of his mother, his sisters around him, because he has three sisters, and difficult situations in school and such, which are actually the least interesting parts of the movie. Everything that has to do with high school, I was like, okay, we get it. He's Jewish, they are discriminating against him because he was Jewish. It's the 1960s, people were not the best people in the world. I mean, they're not now, so back then less so. But that wasn't that interesting. I think the most interesting parts of the movie is when he connects to his family and he has fights with his parents, and even then the cinematography, the art direction, everything like comes alive. Especially, for example, when he shows his movies to his friends and family, those takes are beautiful. And there's a very simple scene in which he talks to an actor who is like a school friend, and he's like explaining what the soldier he's portraying feels in that situation, and the guy starts crying because he really connects with what Sammy is telling him. And that basically means, that Steven Spielberg just knew how to be a good director for actors. There are directors that are very good at making a movie, if you will, but there are others that are more into the acting part of the movie, and others are, like Steven Spielberg, to be very fair, knowledgeable in both spaces, all the technology, all the crafts, and also the acting. So that's very, very interesting. And I think the final, I won't spoil that, but the final scene of the movie is amazingly smart, and the last frame of the movie is absolutely smart. It's very intelligent. It's a little bit abrupt, but I'm really happy it ended that way. It was very smart, and I think the movie is actually pretty kind to its subjects. It's very witty. It's very funny when you don't think it's going to be funny, and it's very poignant where it needs to be also. The editing, it's kind of wild that this movie has so beautiful editing. The editing is fantastic in this movie, and it wasn't nominated for Best Film Editing. And not only that, the movie has several scenes in which Sam actually edits film. So it's like there. It was very obvious, and it wasn't nominated, and it was like, what the hell? Other parts of the movie, however, the cinematography is a little bit, sometimes it's really good, and other times you have this weird framing, and even with the last scene, it doesn't really make any sense. So there was a scene in which the father is framed like from here, and there's a big like empty space on top of him, and maybe that was on purpose. I don't really think so, because the scene didn't really need that. But sometimes that happens. The art direction is very good, the production design, if you will, and so is the costume design, but to be honest, it's not really that we haven't seen before. I think the best parts, the cinematography, I think is very beautiful, except for those not so clever parts. The screenplay is nice. There are some parts again that in which the story stops a little bit, and you wonder, why are they showing me this is not important. Like some of the school thing in the high school, it doesn't really make any sense, and it doesn't really, you don't gain anything from that. More precisely, things that have to do with his bullies. I'm like, okay, he was bullied, but do we really need to hear them talk and be all tragic about it? It's like a little bit too much, but I did like the part with the relationship with one of the girls in school. It was so funny. I laughed so hard because it was hilarious, and it was very smart. The acting is very good. All across the movie, to be honest. I do understand why they nominated, I forget his name, Judd Hirsch for Best Supporting Actor. However, the scene is very small. He's like 5 minutes in the movie, so I don't know. He's good, but is he that good? I don't know. Judi Dench won for like 2 minutes, so whatever. But I don't know. Paul Dano, I'm glad he wasn't nominated because his role is not very showy. He doesn't really change at all in the movie, so I understand that. I think Michelle Williams is more of a supporting character, but of course they wanted to put her in the lead here because she's Michelle Williams. She's a big actress, so maybe it was because of that. She has a very good role, and her scenes are pretty good, and they require even some physicality from her. So I appreciate that, but again, it's more of a supporting role than a leading role, and only for that I think she shouldn't win the Academy Award, to be honest. And to be honest, I haven't seen Kate Blanchett in Tar yet, but Michelle Yeoh was so much better than Michelle Williams. So I'm sorry, Michelle, but I hope she wins someday because she's a really fantastic actress. And of course, I do think that Gabriel Labelle had a fantastic performance in this movie. His eyes and everything in his face is so expressive. and I like his physicality because he's not the typical leading man who's like super tall and blonde. He has dark hair, he has brown eyes, and he's like my height. So I'm like really, really into that. I'm really happy for that, and of course because he's a beautiful man. I mean, he is gorgeous, and there are some shots of his face that are like beautiful. I'm like, oh my god, that's so good. All the girls that are portraying his sisters are really talented as well, and the kids in this movie are not annoying, which is so fantastic because in movies kids can be a pain in the ass, and it's like, okay, shut the fuck up, I don't want to see more kids in movies. But then you see kids like in this movie and you're like, okay, they can do good things. I'm very glad about that. So to be honest, I really enjoyed this movie. It's one of the good ones from Steven Spielberg, so watch it. I have to say that the movie is 2 hours and a half long. It's a little bit too long again. I think you can shave a little bit of this movie off, but you know, I mean, movies are movies, and Steven Spielberg won't do a movie that is less than 2 hours long. I mean, we know that. So yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I hope it wins something at the Academy Awards, maybe Best Production Design, although I don't really think so. Maybe something else, maybe director, but I don't really think he's winning that either. So maybe this is one of those movies that is going to go away empty-handed, sadly, but it deserves a lot of praise and a lot of attention because it's a really good movie. The other movie that I'm going to talk about today is Navalny, a documentary nominated for Best Documentary Feature Film. Navalny tells the story of Alexei Navalny, who is basically the leader of the opposition, although he's in jail now, so he's not really leading anything, but leader of the opposition in Russia. And this movie really takes us to particularly to an incident in 2020, I think, maybe 2019, 2020 actually, in which he was poisoned apparently by the Russian government, with help of Putin and some other people. He was poisoned and he was going to be assassinated on a flight. However, the assassins didn't do the best job ever, so the plane landed. He was basically held as hostage in a hospital, and then he was moved to a hospital in Germany where they actually determined he was poisoned, and he recovered there. And then they tell the story of how he went back to Russia and now he's arrested in a jail in Siberia, if I'm not wrong. So it's a very interesting documentary in the sense that it shows that part of the Russian opposition, and of course it lets us into the eyes of the people that want to know more about what is the other side from Putin. I mean, Putin, of course, rules everything and everywhere in Russia. He's like the biggest thing in Russia, and he controls everything. Russia is basically in a dictatorship right now. He has been president like for 20 years of something, but of course there's an opposition, and Navalny is part of that opposition. However, I mean, of course, these kinds of political documentaries tend to be like very preachy and tend to be a little bit too. They tend to give too many flowers, if I may use that word, to the person that they are depicting, they are talking about, basically. And that happens with anyone, with the Dalai Lama, the Mother Teresa, or whoever it is. I mean, they praise the person and they kind of avoid talking something bad about them, and this movie is kind of like that, especially because the production company behind the movie is CNN Films. And I don't know if you know about CNN is a big broadcasting company, mainly for news in the United States, which leans towards what in my world is the right. I mean, not the center right, if you will. Of course, in the United States, they call CNN leftist, which is hilarious because there's nothing leftist about CNN. I mean, I don't know what planet you're living, but that's not left at all. And I remember when I saw this documentary, I remembered watching CNN recently about something about the Ukraine, actually. And it was amazing how manipulative they have become with their information, to be honest. I mean, they were saying a lot of things in the way you would say to them, to people, to make them angrier and to make them like blame one side or the other and be very very controlling of the information. Basically, I felt that in CNN, and I think CNN is one of the platforms in the United States that loves to portray the United States as heroes and victims sometimes, and the rest of the world like oppressors or oppressed that are saved by the United States, which pisses me off. And in this case with Navalny, it does have this whiff of, oh, Navalny is the savior of Russia. Basically, he's powering the resurgence of a true Russia where democracy is going to be like the ultimate thing. However, I think the movie ignores completely the history of Russia and lacks to understand how Russia got to have someone like Putin as a president. And I think it's very important to learn the history of Russia in order to understand why Russian people think the way they think, and why they have Putin, and why they have Putin, sorry, and why they had, you know, the communist regime, and why they had just a couple of presidents after the fall of the USSR, and, you know, all the complexities of the history of such a great country, in the sense of, you know, great because it has been always powerful, because it has all the resources, but at the same time it doesn't have as many people as other countries, and it has many complexities in the conformation of the country. So I think you really have to appreciate all that in order to really understand the political situation inside of Russia. Is it a dictatorship? Of course, but that's a little bit too simple. You need to understand why people want what they want, what do they exactly want. And there's one instance in this documentary in which actually there's a good question asked to Navalny. And most questions are just idiotic, to be honest, are just manipulative, as CNN often does. But there's one question I really liked, in which the reporter, because there's someone like interviewing him, and they ask, okay, excuse me, Mr. Navalny, why did you go to a rally in support of Russia, basically, and democracy, to which the far right also attended, aka the far right is basically Nazis in Russia. And he was very comfortable saying that he didn't mind them being in the same side as him, as long as they want to build the great Russia that all people want. And I found that incredibly problematic, because I don't know if you know this, but the Nazis invaded part of Russia. They killed many Russians. Yes, when the USSR was a thing, but nevertheless they killed many Russians. So I think that to many people, that is not going to be really acceptable if the next president of Russia is someone that is very lax with the same kind of people that let so many Russians get killed, basically, in the war. I don't think that's very comfortable. And also, there are many LGBT people that are extremely oppressed in Russia, assassinated, violated, raped, whatever you want. And those people that are Nazis and are in the extreme right, as the ones that lead Chechnya, for example, support that oppression against LGBT people. And Mr. Navalny pretends to be a different option. Like, I was very appalled by that, and I'm like, okay, if that's the opposition, you know what, whatever. I mean, that's of course up to the Russians to decide, but it's wild. I mean, it's really insane. So I didn't like the documentary. I thought it was very manipulative, and to be honest, I don't think it should be nominated for Best Academy Feature Film. Because it's ridiculous, documentary feature film, I'm sorry, because it's not, there's nothing of substance there. They're just telling something a reporter could say in CNN, basically. I mean, the movie doesn't really have any meat, doesn't really go far. I mean, there's no journalism in there, basically. So I was very, very disappointed that this movie was nominated for that award. I really hope it doesn't win. Apparently it won't, but I really hope it doesn't, because it's not good at all. Thank you. And this movie is also is available in HBO Max, actually, if you want to check it out. So thank you so much for watching this very long video, but you know, I'm doing long videos because I have to watch all these movies, and I have to talk about 2 in each video, or I will never really end this. So thank you so much. Comment down below whatever you want, and we will see each other very soon. Goodbye.